Hello, this is Teresa. I'm back with another video tutorial. This one is for Dare to be Artsy. I'm going to be sharing how I stamped the images for these 4 cards. So this is more of a technique video than a full card making tutorial. But as you can see, the cards have a pretty basic structure. There is some matting and basic layering. I'm using the Best Teacher stamp from Dare to be Artsy, and I'm going to be using almost all the images out of the stamp set plus some of the dies. And I'm going to be sharing a technique that's kind of like layering a stamp, but they're not intended to be layered stamps. So I deliberately turned this stamp on the wrong side, and I'm stamping it in a light brown ink to color the cookies that I'm going to put on my card. Now, this is not something that would work with every stamp, so you have to look at the stamp to see if it's symmetrical enough to make it work. In this case, this worked actually on at least 4 of the image stamps that are in this set, so I'm going to show you each one and what the differences are in what I did. The cookie is the simplest one to do because it just involves turning the stamp over after stamping the back side of the stamp and stamping the detail in a darker color. Now, this plant step is a little bit more complicated. I'm using a block so that I can use the lines to divide up the top from the bottom, so it just makes it easier to visualize when I'm stamping. And I'm starting from the wrong side of the stamp, so I'm going to get a solid green image at the very top, and then later I will turn this over and stamp the detail in a more contrasting color. So you can see the inks that I'm using from Dare to be Artsy. I'm using, I believe it's Paradise and Margarita Lime. Or I'll put the links below if I have those names wrong. In any case, I'm switching to a light brown ink to stamp the pot. So I still have the stamp on the wrong side to do this, so I get a solid stamped colored image. So you can probably already see how this makes coloring an image much faster if you have a stamp that you can do this with. And what you will notice is after I turn this back over and stamp over top, to get the more detailed part of the stamp, which is the right side of the stamp, so to speak. You have to be kind of careful with lining it up, and as you'll see the first couple of times that I stamped this down, I didn't quite get it aligned right, so I did stamp a few more samples off camera. I didn't want to bore you with watching me restamp them again. So what I'm telling you is this may take some trial and error to figure out how to line it up, or you could use a stamping positioning tool like the Misty if you just wanted to make sure it's stamped right the first time. So as I said, I'm going to stamp a contrasting color on the top and the leaves, and then here I unfortunately somehow zoomed in way too close. That really was not my intention, so when I stamp this last one, you'll at least get to see how it looks. And the key to making this all look right, since you could see there's a lot of color out to the side, is using the matching die, because it cuts out that excess color that I stamped down in the first place. And I'm cutting off a little bit of that edge at the bottom where I could still see some white paper, and I'm kind of trimming that up at the top. But you get the general idea of how this works. It works best with a symmetrical stamp, and if you have a matching die, then you can cut out that extra color that you'd get around the edges of the image. So now I'm going to do the same thing with the stars. There are 2 star stamp sets in this. One is an outline stamp, and that's actually the one I'm using right now, except on the wrong side. So I'm stamping a lighter of 2 different yellow inks for the base of this star. And then I'll clean off and turn that stamp over on the side that has the outline, and I'm going to stamp that in a contrasting color. And unfortunately my head has to get in the way a little bit so that I can align that as close as possible so that I don't get that outline on the outside of the yellow or base that I stamped. And now I'm using the smallest solid stamp, and I'm stamping in the darker color in the center of each one. I'm now going to use the star die out of the set and die cut all of those out. Last but not least is this stamp in the set that's shaped like an apple, and the main purpose for the stamp is to stamp those words that says teaching is a work of art. But what I wanted to do again is using the back side of the stamp, so I've turned it the wrong way on my Misty, and I decided it would be best to use the Misty because I had a feeling I'd have to stamp more than one time to get the most solid image possible. So now that I have the apple part stamped, I added a little more ink around the edges to try to get a little bit darker for a little bit of shading. And now I'm going to turn the stamp the opposite side. And even though this stamp is not perfectly symmetrical, it actually works out perfect. It still fits within the image. So I'm going to stamp this down in some black ink. And now I have my stamped image. And I'm going to use, of course, the stem and the leaf image to stamp the leaf and stem up at the top. And I'm going to stamp that multiple times just to get that a little bit darker. So there you have it, is a new way to use symmetrical shape stamps. I hope you enjoyed watching this video, and if you did, please leave me a thumbs up, and I hope you'll consider subscribing if you haven't already. Until next time, I dare you to get artsy.